Something I never thought about while I was writing my very first book was the acknowledgments section. Granted, when I was writing Where Ravens Roost, my goal was honestly just to finish a full novel. I wanted to prove to myself that I could write a novel from beginning to end. Did I want to get it published? Yes, absolutely, but I didn't think that my first book that I ever finished would actually get published. But then I got a publisher and I needed to write an acknowledgments section, and I didn't know where to start. So these are some of the tips I use now before I have finished writing my novel to prepare myself for the acknowledgments section. First off, if you have never written an acknowledgments section in your life, the best thing you can do is pick up some of your favorite books off the shelf, flip all the way to the back, and see what those authors have written in their acknowledgments section. The acknowledgments section is essentially a section of the book where the author thanks other people who have helped them in the process of writing the book or in the process of publishing the book. And after you read through a few different acknowledgement sections from a few different authors, you'll start to pick up a pattern on certain people who are always mentioned. For example, if you are an author with an agent, the agent is usually one of the first people mentioned in the acknowledgement section. Likewise, your main editor always makes the list. Now, sometimes things happen, especially in traditional publishing, where your main editor might change partway through your book. That can be a little bit dramatic when the process of editing their book, but just make sure that you put in both editors who worked on your novel. For my first book, I was so excited to finally have a book published. I didn't want to miss anybody. I put in all of the editors, including the copy editor and the proofreader. You don't have to do this. Your main editor on your book is fine, but if you want to thank everybody else, you can do that as well. A great tip that you can start doing even before you start writing the actual novel is keeping track of anybody who helped you with factual information on your book. For example, in my third book, Sweet Little Lies, I have a character who is on death row. He is in the U.S. prison system. So I reached out to a friend who I know used to work in the prison system, specifically with death row inmates, to get information on what it is actually like. What are some of the rules? If I, as a visitor, wanted to go and see one of these people, what would the process be like? What would I have to go through so that I knew what was correct for the other characters in the book? Likewise, the plot and many of the suspenseful aspects of this book hinge on actual legal events. So I reached out to a few lawyers who could tell me whether or not these things made sense. Was it possible for me to put this in a book without going into a sci-fi dystopia? Would it make legal sense to somebody reading it in modern time? Where did I find the lawyers to ask these questions to? Facebook. In fact, most of them either went to high school with me or to university with me and were in my English program, but then went on and became attorneys. And so they were so enthusiastic to help out because it was like, wow, somebody in our English program actually went on to become an author, and now I can help with my criminal law expertise. So don't delete your high school and university college friends on Facebook because they could be useful when you write your book. And of course, they went into my acknowledgments. Other people you might want to add into your acknowledgement sections are beta readers, alpha readers, critique partners, or friends and family who supported you during the writing process. Last One Alive was the novel I wrote during the pandemic, and that was an extremely difficult time to be creative. I was just all over the place mentally. Fortunately, I had some really good friends who kept me motivated, kept me inspired, were willing to read chapters of the book and give me their first impressions. I also thanked my personal trainer because he kept me physically and mentally healthy during this time so that I could actually finish writing the book by my deadline. And naturally, you want to consider other people from your publication team who helped this book get to the readers. That could include your cover artist, your PR person, anybody that you worked with individually or who just worked on it in general. Sometimes you can just give a general shout out thank you to the entire team, or sometimes you want to bring out an individual in particular if they did something extra special that made you feel great about your book getting published. Usually acknowledgement sections are not very long, mostly a page or a page and a half. Some authors are very brief and they cut it down to a single paragraph or two at the most. The length is usually up to the author, although keep in mind if you are already writing a very long book, your publisher may want you to cut back on your acknowledgements, make them a little bit shorter so that the printing of the book is a little less costly. Last but not least, feel free to add some fun to it, add a little bit of your personality so that your readers can get a little bit of an insight into who you are outside of the narrative of your story. Something many of my readers have picked up on is that I always thank my cats at the end of my books. But in particular with my debut novel, I actually thanked the teachers who taught me how to read and write back in elementary school, and I also thanked a university creative writing professor who really was a big inspiration for me finally taking the jump and saying, I'm going to do this, I'm going to write a book. Writing your first acknowledgement section can be a little bit intimidating sometimes because the sky is the limit, but have a little bit of fun with it. Don't worry about it. But to make it easy for yourself, start keeping track of the people you think you want to thank on the journey. This will save you having to remember who helped you out over a year ago when it comes time to actually writing it. One last thing to keep in mind before you finalize your acknowledgement section is asking permission to put these people into your book. Sometimes people prefer to be anonymous, and that's okay. But if somebody does want to be mentioned in the book, be sure to ask them how they want to be referred to. First name and last name, first name, last initial, first name only, nickname, pseudonym if they are another writer. Ask them how they would like you to put them into your acknowledgement section. That's just being nice.